TaxAct can think of a million things more fun than filing taxes. TaxAct is going to name some now. Sitting in traffic, folding a fitted bedsheet, listening to your coworker talk about his fantasy team, digging a hole, digging an even larger hole next to that original hole. Unfortunately, TaxAct's filing software can't make taxes fun, but TaxAct can help you get them done. TaxAct, let's get them over with.
Sometimes your cat can be a mystery, like when they get so attached to certain cardboard boxes. But when you use Fresh Step cat litter, there's no question that you're making your cat happy, thanks to amazing odor control. Fresh Step clumping cat litters prevent stinky crumbles and make scooping easy by locking in liquid and odor immediately. That means you can keep your house clean and your bond strong. There's no mystery here. Find Fresh Step cat litter at a store near you. Fresh Step is a registered trademark of the Clorox Pet Products Company. Certain trademarks used under license from the Procter & Gamble Company or its affiliates.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar. Today's review, the classic Big Mac, Hamburglar.
Rubble, rubble.
He said, there's more sauce in every bite. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Rubble. Available at most restaurants in this area.
When it comes to teaching kids and teens about money, practice makes perfect. That's where Greenlight comes in. With a debit card and money app of their own, kids learn to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest. Parents send instant money transfers, create custom chores, and automate allowance, while kids track their spending, set savings goals, and practice money skills they can use today and for life. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.
How's it going, and welcome to episode 72 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcherless Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at OnTheWirePod. Of course, if you're listening to a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And I'm once again joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting, who should be followed himself on the Twitter at HastingKevin. And Kevin, the trade deadline is 10 days removed now. So we had a nice long episode last week talking about it for almost like 3 hours, which is amazing. I loved having Jason on and going through that. But now I just feel like we can just rest easy and do nothing. We can just treat our teams like best balls and just rest up for the next like a month and a half. That's how this works. Please say
yeah.
yes.
I wish it was that way sometimes. As much as we love doing this, and as soon as the season is over, I'll start drafting again because I just can't handle not having fantasy baseball pretty much on a daily basis. It does get a little tiresome this time of year, and yeah, that would be nice, but definitely not the case. The things that we talk about all the time, we got to concentrate all season long, like paying attention to categories and schedules and playing time. And as much as we talk about that all season long, it's much more important over these past couple of months. We have almost a full third of the season to go, so there's still a lot of ground we can make up.
Yeah, when we talk about that in March, when we talk about the grind, when we talk about always paying attention, we're talking about mid-August. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, it makes it easier when you're in at least double-digit leagues. You can start, I don't condone it per se, but everybody starts paring down the leagues that they're paying the most attention to. Sure, you're still setting all your lineups and maybe you make a bid here or there, but NFBC, for example, has an option when you're looking at your list of my teams. You can hit the little checkbox on the right that says hide. They have that there for a reason. And so if you are in 12th in a 12-team league with no end in sight, maybe just do yourself a favor, hit that little checkbox, and maybe take that off your shoulders at this point in the season.
The flip side of this, we don't talk about it a whole lot, maybe not as much as we should. Head-to-head leagues, we're getting close to playoff time, so they're really ramping up while we're getting a little monotonous, as we're talking about here when we're dealing with our roto leagues. It's getting down to crunch time in head-to-head.
Oh, yeah. To be honest, this is not a dig at my own head-to-head leagues, but the smart leagues are getting into playoffs now. So they're not having to have their championship. Like at least my home dynasty league, we cut out the last week of season. We treat the last week of season like week 17 in football. It doesn't exist. Our championship ends the Sunday prior. But there are some forward-thinking leagues out there that start their playoffs mid-August, so that their championship is like the first week of September. And not only does that help with managing multiple leagues and not having to worry about one less league to worry about in September down the stretch, but also all those manipulations that you see in rosters that we're going to talk about ad nauseum week in and week out from the end of August through the end of September and into October this year. You don't have to deal with those when you have their playoffs set up that way. So yeah, head to head. I know Michael Gouvier has been beating the drum on this for a while now. It's head to head, man, is a lot of fun, especially if you know the people in your league. And this is the time that you really get down to crunch. And it's even more fun because half of your league's still in it, half of your league isn't, but everybody's still paying attention and talking smack. Again, as long as everybody in your league, and it's a lot more fun that way. All right, man, because we are in this grind, I'm really happy that we got a great guest with us this week to talk about the FAAB. And I'm very happy to introduce Lee Keller, who will help us break down all the FAAB options for this Sunday. Lee can be heard regularly as the co-host of This Week in Fantasy Baseball podcast, which comes out every Friday right here on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Lee and John do a great job summarizing and analyzing everything you might have missed from the week prior, also helping you prep for the week coming up, and doing a really good job of focusing on particular pieces, typically on the Pitcher List site, that can help you in various ways, whether it's a deep dive into a certain player or strategy that you might be considering, especially this time of year. Lee had a great guest on, I think it was 2 episodes ago, talking about how to put together good trades in your league and just going into a deep dive on that. So that was really great to hear. That's kind of an evergreen episode too, so you can go back and make sure you listen to that one, especially if your deadline hasn't quite passed yet. But you should be following Lee on the Twitter, and he's also streaming on Twitch. Both are at Regicidal, and that'll be a link to that in the show description. So I'm not going to bother spelling that out. Sorry. You can go to our show description and click the direct link. Lee, man, thanks for joining us, man. How's the weekend, honestly, the season been treating you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, both of you. It's an honor to be on here. It's so much fun being a part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network in any way, shape, or form. So to have my own podcast on the network is awesome. My co-host John is absolutely awesome as well. So we've had a lot of fun this season hosting that podcast together. And this is also 72 episodes you guys have had. So you guys have been around quite some time. So congratulations on that, because, hey, having a podcast that successful is very cool. Very cool. So shout out to you guys. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, by all means, man, my season's been okay. I've been doing all right in TGFBI. I've been doing all right in my NFBC satellite leagues. My home league's been an absolute disaster. I wish it would have been going better, but it happens, man. It happens. You were saying how head-to-head is a lot of fun, and that's what my home league is. My home keeper league is actually a 10-team keeper league, and it's head-to-head, and that is the most fun because it's me and my 9 close friends in real life, and we have so much fun day in and day out. We just get to rip into each other, have a good time, make horrible trades. It's just a lot of fun. It takes away from everything industry related that people do for NFBC and TGFBI. It's such a different angle. So head to head to me is my preferred way to play fantasy, whether it's football, baseball, whatever it is. I just like head to head better. But in general, the season's been all right. It's been a mixed bag. I won pretty much all of my leagues last year, so I can't complain about having a down year this year. So,
you got it all out of the way.
Yeah.
So this year you're just sitting on a cushion. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just coasting. I'm sitting here with all my trophies, and I'm going to give them back after this season, but I'll take the ones that I have right now, and I'll keep it. I still have it for a good few months, so
Man, that's
I'll
the
keep
worst
my trophies.
feeling. When you have that plaque or that trophy or whatever your league does for a whole year, and then all of a sudden you realize at the end of September, I have to give this to someone else. This is the saddest day of my life.
Yeah, it's so bad because we have a home league trophy, and I finally got a plaque on it. We actually, in our first 4 years, was the same person who won, which is a lot of luck because that's ridiculous. But
sure.
We've had 7 years in this league, and I finally won for the first time, and I've come in first in the regular season for 5 years in a row. I lose in the first round, second round of the playoffs every time. It's been horrible. And I finally won last year, and having to give this trophy back is going to be the hardest thing ever. They're going to have to pry it from my hands because I don't think I can give it back. I love it too much.
This is why I'm going to give a shout out to Austin Bristow II, who in our Discord he posted a photo of a custom embroidered hat he just made for his Out of the Park baseball league that he's had for quite some time. When I saw that, I felt so vindicated about my own custom hat that I had made to commemorate my 4th championship in my home league that, again, it's been around for over 20 years. So when I got this hat made, and I was like, thanks so much to seeing somebody else is doing something like this. So that's what I would recommend. You don't have to give back custom made stuff. You guys, nobody can see it obviously, but I've got this beautiful custom sticker that I put on some glassware that I gave to everybody in my league for that championship as well. That's how you commemorate. You ingrain this memory into the minds of everybody in your league, whether they like it or not. You can never take that away. So
how many of them still have that sticker on glassware and are using it?
I don't know about their kitchens. I know I have 4 sitting because I had a couple extra made. Yeah. And the sticker, it goes through the dishwasher. It stays on. I'm pretty impressed. I got to remember, I want to give a shout out to the sticker company, but it was too long ago that I won the championship. I do not remember. And once I do, I will make sure I give a tweet out to that. But let's get into it, guys. We do have a few news and notes. It's not as much as the trade deadline, spoiler alert, but we won't hit on everything like I typically say. We're just going to touch on things that may most likely affect your consideration for FAAB. Kevin, I'm going to start with you because I have to with this news item. It happened right after our last episode went out on Monday. Matt Carpenter, he goes down with a fractured foot. And he's out for, supposedly in a very good way, he's out for about 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, as he comes back from making sure his foot comes back healthy. But that's still the majority of the regular season as we see it. Hopefully he's back for the Yankees in the playoffs. But what impact are you seeing for the Yankees lineup with Carpenter missing at least those 6, if not the rest of the regular season?
Yeah, this is, oh man. We joked about this when he first started getting a couple of plate appearances and hit a home run in his first game and then hit a couple more shortly thereafter. It's like, he's going to hit 30 home runs, isn't he?
He was halfway there.
He was halfway there in just 154 plate appearances with a full 2 months of the season left. I really think it was going to happen. I really do. He was hitting over 300 in the process. But as far as the Yankees go, there hasn't been a whole lot really different this week. Even Rizzo came back the day before Carpenter got hurt. And we had Jason on last week talking about roster resource. And one thing I don't think we brought up is one of the cool things when you go to a roster resource page of a team and you have that top portion with the starting lineup, the right far 6 columns are the positions played and where they were in the lineup for the last 6 games, a little grid there. And if you look at that for the Yankees this week with Carpenter gone, Rizzo is back, right? There's only 2 players that haven't played every day since Wednesday. One of them is Jose Trevino, got a day off at catcher, and Higashioka got a spot. So, of course, we expect that to happen. Most teams are playing their backup catcher at least a couple of days a week these days. The other one was Andujar, played 1 day in left field, and Benintendi got a day off. That's it. Everything else has been the same. The kind of thing we need to remember here, though, is Giancarlo Stanton's coming back. Maybe soon, maybe sooner than we think. He's been participating in baseball activities now for a week and a half or so. And not a guy we would expect to have to go on a long rehab assignment, if one at all. So he could be back in the lineup at any time. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back sometime this coming week. So obviously with the DH there in New York, Gleyber Torres has actually been the DH 2 of the 4 games they've played, including Saturday since Carpenter went down. Andujar for 1. and DJ LeMahieu for 1. So right now it seems like they're just using the opportunity to give guys a break and kind of shuffle them in and out of the designated hitter spot. And when Stanton comes back, we expect him to be in there most days, some outfield. And so it's going to be guys like, Aaron Hicks is going to lose at bats if you're using him in a deep league, and guys are going to get a day off here and there. So I don't see a whole lot difference in the Yankees lineup, other than for the past week and a half, they haven't been as potent as they have been all season.
The return of Rizzo the day before Carpenter gets hurt, is that not suspect? That's a little suspect. I'm not saying anything for sure. It just seems a little odd. No, of course, that was just a very strange timing for that. And obviously, like you said, that snapshot of the lineups that Roster Research puts together is a great tool there. Obviously, you can go even further back and look at the full lineup chart that they offer. But the fact that they put the last week's worth of games right there on the depth chart page helps in this situation for sure, because literally the exact amount of days that Carpenter has been out.
Yeah, I think, first of all, with Carpenter going down and Gallo being traded to the Dodgers, I think the most impactful thing is just you can see the holes in the Yankees lineup now. You can see the problem. There's no fall guy. Joey Gallo was the best part of their team because they could just point to him and say, it's your fault. You stink. That's what they've been doing the whole season. But now that he's gone, now it's, oh, wow, Josh Donaldson's not been very good. And the rest of the lineup's not been very good besides Aaron Judge, who's an animal. So you just see these holes pop up now and you're like, wow, we actually really need Matt Carpenter back. And that's weird. It's very weird to say.
To say that in 2022 is definitely a weird statement to make. Hey, really quick poll before we go on to the next, guys. Is Aaron Judge going to break the home run record? It's simple as that. I don't think people are realizing how far along he actually is at this stage. Lee, what, really quick, yes or no?
No, I think he is going to hit 60 something. I don't think he gets near 70, but I do think he hits 60 something. This is the same pace as Barry Bonds was on. He's on pretty much identical pace to what he was, but he's also not on steroids, so I don't think he does it.
Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, I think. As Aaron Judge put it, is he going to break the American League record? Kevin, do you think he breaks either one?
I think he gets to 60. So I agree. It's going to be tough, but I was just looking earlier. It's not something that we typically recommend doing it, but I was taking a glance at just the stats for the past 28 days leaderboard. 15 home runs in the past 28 days. That's crazy. So
that's not normal.
He's got the ability. We know he could do it if he has another month of the almost 2 remaining like that, then that gets him really close. But yeah, I think he finishes in the 60s somewhere.
Right. Still very happy to have him on any roster this season for sure, regardless of the outcome of that race. All right, Lee, we got some pitcher news here. The Astros got Lance McCullers back. He returned to their rotation. He pitched today, finishing up as we're recording this on Saturday. Just besides just being happy that you can get something out of McCullers on your fantasy teams, what other impacts are you expecting to see out of the Houston rotation that we should be watching?
Yeah, so I was actually hesitant to bring McCullers back if you had him on your IL because he is versing the Athletics, who are one of the worst offenses in the league. But his velocity was down in his rehab starts. He also wasn't doing well. He was getting lit up, quite frankly, in his rehab starts. So I was worried a little bit. But then he goes 6 innings against Oakland, 5 strikeouts, quality start, no earned runs, as expected because Oakland is terrible. But I was surprised that McCullers did this well on his way back. I didn't see the underlying metrics of how fast his velocity was and if his breaking stuff was good. But hey, the fact that he went 6 already is really promising. The Astros have kind of an embarrassment of riches right now in the rotation. So they've got Verlander, obviously, Framber Valdez, who's been having a great season, Urquidy, who's been pitching great as of late, tons of quality starts, Luis Garcia, Christian Javier, who's been emerging, and then you have McCullers, of course. So it's really tough to think that one of them gets the boot. So I'm thinking, I don't know if they've announced it, but I'm thinking they go to a 6-man rotation. And if not, I think maybe Garcia gets the boot out of everybody. I don't think you could take Verlander, Valdez, Urquidy, or Javier out. So what do you do there? So I don't really know if there is going to be a 6-man rotation or if they're just going to monitor him and bring him back slowly. But I think a 6-man rotation would be good for an old Verlander, for a coming back from injury McCullers, from Javier, who is probably going to be on an inning limit at some point this season. So it's really nice to see McCullers come back and have a strong start in his first start back. But yeah, I think the Astros are just going to be coasting from here on out.
I hope Miss Upton is not listening, because you're going to get an earful for calling her man old.
Old in the sense of baseball terms, okay? He's not old in real life. I don't think you're getting
be okay.
You're not old until you're like 85 years old. That's when you are officially old in my book. But old in baseball terms, Verlander's practically a fossil.
Good walk back. I like that. That was good.
Yeah,
That was
of course. No offense, Mrs. Upton.
Yeah, the 6-man rotation. Come on, that's just almost a gimme at this stage of the year. A good chunk of teams have been doing it all year long. Never mind as the stretch run, as Houston finds themselves with an 11-game lead in the AL West. It honestly would just be incredibly silly for them to continue to push a 5-man rotation out there with this kind. I can imagine them giving Javier like a day off, like a skip a rotation spot, or bring him back to 3 or 4 inning starts throughout from here on out, just to save his arm for the obvious playoff spot that they are going to clinch. Well, seems like any day now. All right, Kevin, another rotation that very well could be seeing a mix-up, as we can probably say that every week for the Dodgers. But Dustin May, he's finishing up his very long rehab stint for the Dodgers. He's now expected to rejoin the team next weekend, so we'll be talking about him next week, I'm sure, on the show. But what sort of production are you expecting or even hoping to see out of May for the rest of 2022?
I think the only question I have with Dustin May is, when is he going to be available in NFBC leagues? He wasn't drafted in most places. We already knew about the injury, so he's not available yet in most NFBC leagues. I think he's 1% rostered in online championships, 0% in main events, not available in any of my leagues, but he has been really good in his rehab assignments. He's up to 5 innings as of August 9th, and 3 hits, 1 earned run, and 8 strikeouts. Awesome. 4 innings the time before that. So he's pitching. He's getting built up. I don't know why I'm stumbling so much just to say that. He's built up. The question is, we were thinking he'd probably be back sometime next weekend. He pitched on the 9th, so he could pitch tomorrow or Monday, 1 more rehab start, and we were planning on him next weekend. As you mentioned, there might be another issue with Andrew Heaney, surprise, after Saturday. So if that's the case, he is lined up to pitch on Thursday. So would they just skip this last rehab assignment and slide him in there on Thursday so we can actually bid on Dustin May next Sunday?
There's no way a Major League Baseball team would be that nice to us.
Well, we don't know about when he would get in. He could pitch tomorrow, and then he'd be ready Friday or Saturday anyway. But it's assumed they'd slide him in after Urias, and PPO will be the odd man out. But he's going to go Tuesday, and the Heaney news being today probably doesn't affect the first half of the week until we get to Thursday. So him sliding in there makes a lot of sense, because everybody else will have only been on their 3 days rest at the time that if Heaney goes out. So makes a lot of sense. We might see him Thursday. Yeah, Dustin May is going to be a high dollar fab, if there is such a thing, this time of year when he becomes available, whether it's next Sunday or the Sunday after.
I'm super excited about Dustin May. I wish I had any shares of him anywhere. He's taken in all of my leagues on the IL for most teams. He's been so good, like you said, in the rehab starts. It's been unbelievable. And I am at my wit's end with Heaney. I have him in 3 leagues, and he's been so good when he's on the mound, which is maybe 4 times. I'm over Heaney. It's very frustrating.
He's had quite a bit of starts lately. They won't let him go past 4.2. It's the magic 4.2 number.
Yep.
He's
not great in the quality start league.
He gets 10 runs of support today on Saturday, and you go back and check the box score. I've got him in my home league, so I'm watching that one the most. And great, I got something in the win column. He's finally going to get to the 5 inning mark. He's going to get there, and then boom. I'm like,
of course.
Like, I get it. he's got a lead. You don't have to chance it. You pulled him. And then I realized he got hit in the arm and he didn't really want to come out. He stayed in the game until he realized he could not do that anymore.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Dustin May pitch as well.
In general. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you remember, all of us were wondering when he was starting to break out, where are the strikeouts? It's only 16 innings and it is AAA, but 26 strikeouts in 16 innings this season.
They're looking good.
He might be onto something.
Yep.
The same thing can be said, though, about the Dodgers, as we just talked about with the Astros. They've got such a lead, a bigger lead than the Astros do in their Western division. 16 games currently as we're recording this over the Padres. They obviously do not need to push anybody. Never mind guy coming back from surgery and being out for so long that I can't imagine that May is going to. I'd be very surprised if May gets more than one win, like for your fantasy teams from here until the end of September, just based on how many innings they're going to put him through. Now, obviously the run support, I'm not concerned about. It's just a matter of whether he's going to go past the 4.2 mark. And I can see that happen because I also don't necessarily think that Justin May is a rotation piece for the Dodgers come October. Like, more than likely, they're going to use him in October. But I'd be very surprised if he's starting a game, especially in the first series, unless something drastic happens to the rest of the rotation or something, Kershaw's not back or something else might happen there. So not to push him. They have no reason to have to push him. They can do the Tampa Bay thing where they're just rotating in relievers from here on out and utilize their innings in that fashion so that everybody's fresh for October. So I'd be a little wary about spending a ton of money on May. I think exactly what you said, Lee, about Heaney, what May gives you when he's out on the mound is going to be very good. But if you're chasing wins, May is not somebody I'm going to be spending a lot of money on.
If Heaney or Kersh aren't back by the playoffs, I could see May having a role in there. Mm-hmm. I think he might be more of a Julio Urias role of when they were in the playoffs, where he was a 3-inning firearm out of the pen, dominating, shutting you down. Urias dominated in that role. And I think we could see Dustin May doing that in the playoffs. And I agree with you that I think he maybe gets 2 wins in his time from when he comes up to the end of the year, just because he might just go 5 every time. And I'm sure he's going to have a lead, but I don't think he gets more than 3 wins.
Sure. All right, Lee, let's go up to Minnesota, as we tend to talk about quite a bit here on this show, it seems. But this time, not so positive news. Alex Kirilloff, he's going to miss the remainder of the season after having surgery on his wrist, which, if you know anything about Alex Kirilloff, seems like it's par for the course with him, whether it's back, ankle, I don't know. I'm making up body parts at this point, but it does not have a strong track record. But what impact are you seeing, or do you see in the Minnesota lineup switching around with Kirilloff not even a consideration from here on out?
Yeah, first of all, I wish my co-host of This Week in Fantasy Baseball was here. He's a Minnesota Twins fan. John is.
This is why I made sure to give you this question.
Yeah. Shout out to John, because he would be able to answer this with flying colors, but I'll try to do him justice. Kirilloff is someone we've been perpetually excited about, right? Like, he was this prospect guy with such high pedigree. Everyone was excited about him for fantasy. Really good eye at the plate, decent power potential, just someone that you could really get behind. And he's just constantly injured, his wrist a few times, just constant injuries. So without him, the Twins outfield is actually gross. It's disgustingly bad. And mainly because Buxton is dealing with that
he's not
leg
in the outfield
problem.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. So he's not playing the outfield every single day as he would, because he's probably the best center fielder in the game when he's playing the outfield. But now that he's not, thank God Max Kepler came back, because their starting outfield before Max Kepler returned and Buxton was not in the outfield was Nick Gordon, Gilberto Celestino, and Jake Cave. Alex, who are those guys for 500? What in the world is that? There's no realm where that should be your starting outfield. So that's actually terrible. Nick Gordon has had some flashes of decency in the lineup, and he comes from a baseball family, D. Gordon and whatnot, but that outfield is really bad. That lineup is looking worse without Kirilloff. Thank God, like I said, Kepler came back. If Buxton can play every day, it looks better, but I don't know. The Twins they needed a bat at the deadline, I think, and John and I talked about this, where they needed to get one bat. They got Correa and whatnot, but they needed another force there because it's rough. It's rough. Jorge Polanco's been Luis Arias has been pretty good. Twins outfield needs some help. That's a big hole there. So yeah, I think that you're just going to see this season, at least, those three guys, Nick Gordon, Gilberto Celestino, and Jake Cave, take over the majority of the playing time for where Kurloff would have been playing. So nothing to get excited about, to be honest.
I feel like we've had this conversation revolving around Jake Cave more than one other time. It's just especially come this time of year, like Jake Cave is a thing now. Cave is a thing now. All right. Now we have to be okay with that. We have to get behind it because it's not going away.
Yeah, Cave is, I don't know. He's okay. He's a major leaguer. Hey, props to him. You're in the big leagues, kid. Good job. Better than I could be. So,
all right. Else that is now a major leaguer, Atlanta's top prospect, Vaughn Grissom, has been called up. He's going to fill in at second base with Orlando Arcia hitting the shelf. Kevin, he presumably is going to man second base pretty much every day, but can he do enough to keep the second base job? And he should be getting second base eligibility in most formats coming into it with shortstop as a shortstop prospect. But can he do enough to hold on to the job even after Arcia returns, who's obviously just filling in for Ozzie Albies himself?
Yeah, he might be able to hold off Arcia, but not Albies. And Albies is closer to returning, I think, than many realize. He's been saying mid to late August in every update I've seen since the beginning of July. And some of those updates are as recent as last week, still saying mid to late August. It's mid-August. It's been over 2 weeks since he had the boot removed and started partaking in baseball activities. There's that term again. I don't even really know what it means, but baseball activities. And
just
then,
jogging, isn't that an activity?
He's watching baseball games.
But they did specifically mention throwing a couple of weeks ago, and then, but no updates since August 4th. But everything that we've been seeing for the last 6 to 8 weeks has been how he is ahead of schedule or on schedule, and mid to late August. As we're recording, it's August 13th. So we may see Albies back within the next couple of weeks. And I'm just afraid with the Braves lineup that there won't be a spot for Grissom, as exciting as he has been already. All-star bat flip in his very first game.
Oh, sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But he's almost like a Michael Harris light, and similar player, maybe not quite the skills that Harris has, and I think he's got a bright future, but there's just not room for him at this point. And I don't think, at least in the short term, the minor league seasons end early, and we do still expand rosters a little bit. We don't go to 40 anymore, we go to 28. He probably has a spot on this team in September, even with Albies back when the minor league season ends. But he's just not going to get the playing time to be fantasy relevant once that occurs. Another week, maybe two, and hopefully he continues to perform. But then I think he's probably moving to a bench role.
That's exactly the comp I made. I'm going to pretend you listen to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. But on our podcast, I also said Michael Harris is a comp. It's a cop-out because he's on the same team, but it's identical. They do the same things. Home runs, stolen bases. They have great potential. I don't know where Atlanta keeps digging these people out of, because they are just cruising with all these call-ups. And Vaughn Grissom is exciting. I didn't realize how big he was. I said this on the podcast. He's a gigantic dude. When I think someone comes up from Double-A, I expect them to be like Nick Allen of the Athletics, where they're 4'11", but this guy's gigantic.
Yeah, Atlanta's been obviously had some positive things happen in the last couple of years with but let's remember the Christian Paches and the Drew Waters, sorry Kevin, of the world. They do exist as well. They're not infallible over there in Atlanta, but they've done some good things. So I'd be curious to see what Grissom ends up doing next year, whether or not he's the heir apparent to shortstop, with Swanson possibly looking elsewhere. So Lee, let's go. This one kind of threw a curveball at me today. I had this note on here for the last couple days. Once we had the note of DL Hall getting the call up to Baltimore, he did. He started here on Saturday, if that's what you want to call it. He made his MLB debut. Technically, that's what that was. It was a lot of other things as well, but I'll let you talk about that. And then promptly he was sent right back down to the minors. It was noted that he's going to actually make a switch over to a reliever and come back in September in that role. So that should be a quick turnaround for him, DL Hall, who's been starting for the entire season as a starter. I was going to ask you, of course, was it worth rushing to the wire to add him regardless of what he did on the mound today? I'm not going to ask you that because the answer is no. But with the news of him coming back as a reliever, is there anybody else in the Baltimore rotation that you might have more of an eye on, knowing that their spot is safer than maybe you thought it was 24 hours ago?
Yeah, DL Hall is someone that I was excited about because his strikeout potential is through the roofs. He had 126 strikeouts in 77.2 innings pitched in the minors this season. So that's a lot of strikeouts, but he did exactly what he did in his MLB debut about what he's been doing in the minors. He's got a 4.52 ERA throughout the minors this year, and he gave up a bunch of runs in his debut, but he got 6 strikeouts in 3.2 innings. So that's exactly what you're going to get out of DL Hall right now. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be things that happen, and he's going to get a shot eventually. And if he's in the bullpen, maybe he's a long reliever option. Maybe if you're in a holds league, maybe it's someone you take a shot on. He's going to get you a lot of strikeouts. But I think right now you just stay away from DL Hall. Maybe next season he will be someone you want to draft. But right now, no. And in terms of other people that could come up for the Orioles, I really don't see a name that really shines to me. Grayson Rodriguez, we were really excited about at the beginning of the season. Obviously, he's not pitching again this season. DL Hall, once again, he was their 4th or 5th prospect in their system, their ranked prospect, and he's obviously not going to be a starter. And then they have people like Seth Johnson and Chase McDermott and Mike Baumann, and I don't see any of them coming up anytime soon. Maybe Baumann, maybe he does something, but other than that, I really don't see anybody coming up that we would be even remotely excited about or that we would want to get in FAAB. So probably not. I guess Jordan Lyle's rotation spot's safe. That's about all I can say. But yeah, I don't think there's anything great there for the Orioles rotation, at least.
Yeah, that's something, though, that especially in deeper leagues, and if you're really holding on to anything that you possibly can, that's the most important thing, knowing that the players that you're putting on the field have a job. Simple as that.
Exactly.
Security I'm not considering dropping these guys, knowing that their job's not going to be taken by some rookie coming up who's, especially on a team like Baltimore, who is making noise. They are currently a playoff team. They are right now, they are a playoff team. We will see the Baltimore Orioles in the playoffs if it were to start tomorrow.
They're not even the last playoff team.
Yeah.
They might be. They would host a game, I think.
That's crazy to think about.
Playoff game in Baltimore is a sight that we have not seen in quite some time. Yeah, just having a job is something to consider as well. All right, Kevin, the big news, obviously, that we are all amping to talk about, and I am not even going to say the RW word at all throughout this whole episode. Fernando Tatis Jr. suspended 80 games. He should be, if I remember correctly, he should miss the first 42 games of 2023 in addition to the remainder of this season. So he's not coming back. He's an obvious drop. Not my question to you, though. You've talked about Hong-Sung Kim quite a bit, I think, this season. And so does this are you less worried about Kim, or are you less worried about Jerson Profar, losing his leadoff spot with Tatis not coming back? I think that was the discussion that we had a little bit last week. And both of these guys, I'd be very surprised if either one of them are readily available in your leagues. Kim, perhaps, but he should be scooped up more than likely at the end of this Sunday, knowing that his job is pretty safe as a very good defender at shortstop for the Padres. But between those two guys, the worry of Kim losing playing time and the worry about Profar losing his leadoff spot, which one are you happier about?
Both, for different reasons, and you alluded to them, right? Profar, it's the leadoff spot, and so we can continue. We'll expect him to continue on his 90 to 100 run scored pace with nice RBI numbers as well. He's on pace for 70 or so. So Profar sticking at the top of the lineup with now Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Brandon Drury, Bell, all hitting behind him. Heck, he might even exceed 100 runs scored on the season if they get a little hot here down the stretch. And Kim has been really good recently. It took him until the beginning, mid-July, before he started doing what I expected him to do all season long. But in 6 of the last 7 scoring periods, he's hit at least 270. He's driving in multiple runs most week, scoring multiple runs most weeks for us. In fact, each of 6 of the last 7, he's done that, other than the half week that was the All-Star break. Hitting in the 7 spot now, and now that's safe as well. I'm excited for both of these guys. And in 12-team leagues, Adam, Hae-Sung Kim is available. He's only rostered in 37% of online championships.
Yeah, regardless of whether or not you need a shortstop or not, second base, third base, shortstop eligibility on the NFBC platform. He has all those eligibilities on Yahoo, CBS, and what have you. And so to see him being available, of course, 100% rostered in the main event. So when you get to those 15 teamers, it's all about playing time. It's all about putting a warm body out on the field for both Major League team and for your fantasy rosters. 12 teamers, all about production. It's what have you done for me lately? And like you said, if Kim's actually putting up the numbers and putting up things that are valuable, and you're going to be getting extra at-bats out of him from here on out, somebody probably you should be looking at. Profar, I have to look up Profar, but I'm assuming Profar, because of how hot he had been leading up to the trade deadline, not so much readily available out there.
And the great thing about Kim and a few players like him around the league, especially when they're performing well, is he has saved me many times in NFBC formats when maybe I had better options earlier in the week, or maybe I didn't like his matchups for the first half of the week. Just having him available for the weekend when stuff goes wrong, like Matt Carpenter, and having him for the weekend to slide in there, because he's available in enough spots. You can almost slide him in for anybody if you shuffle things around properly.
Yeah, especially with that triple position eligibility.
And just a note too, he's only 13% rostered on Yahoo, so he's readily available for everybody.
So that will, I don't know how long that'll take for something like that to change with Yahoo being daily moves. You think that if the move was going to be made, it would have been made by now in Yahoo. Even with the multi-position eligibility, there are a lot of players on Yahoo that have multi-position eligibility.
Oh yeah, lots.
Jerson Profar as well has 3 positions in Yahoo that he's eligible at.
I was thinking about this earlier today. Dustin May is now 55% rostered on Yahoo. So that's probably about the percentage of Yahoo leagues that are daily moves leagues.
Still paying.
Yeah.
We'll see how it looks on Monday in Yahoo and see if that changes. I venture to guess that the percentage of daily moves leagues on Yahoo is a lot higher than 55%. But that's just my guess. All right, Lee, the last note here, we go over to Miami. They got a couple guys back. John Birdie, who everybody's been clamoring for, especially if you lost some ground in stolen bases after you lost them. And Brett Anderson, they both come back for the Fish. Anderson homered in his first game back. With these two guys back in the lineup as probable mainstays, especially with how Brett Anderson's history and then John Birdie's recent history, who do you see losing out in playing time for at least the short term?
Yeah, John Birdie, and I think it's Brian Anderson. Brian Anderson came back. Brett Anderson, wasn't he a pitcher for the Dodgers?
Oh yeah, he did not come back. Brian Anderson definitely hit a home run the other day.
Okay.
Not so much Brett Anderson.
If Brett Anderson hit a homer, I would be shocked. That is a pickup and a half for the Marlins if he hit a home run. But John Birdie and Brian Anderson both coming back is huge for the Marlins because their lineup has been awful. They've been really bad. And for fantasy purposes, John Birdie has been a savior for people, just being able to scoop him off the wire and plug him in for a lot of stolen bases. He was getting 3 per game, 2 per game on a regular basis. So it was impressive to see what Birdie was doing, but I don't think we're going to see that level of play moving forward, but he is going to be an everyday player for the Marlins. Same with Brian Anderson. He's very good. Same with people like Garrett Cooper. You're just going to see them in the lineup because they're good MLB hitters. The people that suffer the most from this are the 2, I would say, so-called fill-ins. Charles LeBlanc, who is playing third base for the time being. He's probably out. He wasn't doing anything anyway. He was just a plug-in guy. You probably will see Joey Wendell move to third and John Birdie play second. I'm assuming that's how the roster construction would look. Not 100% sure. Don't follow the Marlins that closely. And then Brian De La Cruz, who has so much potential and at some points of the season was doing well and then just fell off a cliff. And he hasn't done anything since. And even in his time in the last 15 games, his game log has been horrible. So Brian Anderson takes over for De La Cruz. Birdie takes over for LeBlanc. And then the lineup looks the same. When Jazz Chisholm comes back, then we have a little bit more questions to ask. Probably Miguel Rojas suffers a little bit. But besides that, nothing really lost here in terms of a fantasy perspective. Brian De La Cruz, probably no one rostered him. And same with Charles LeBlanc. If anyone rostered Charles LeBlanc, then I really hope you're in a 35-team league, because that's just way deep. But yeah, not really much of a loss here. It's great to see Birdie back for people who lost out on him. And Brian Anderson's a guy who's a good 15-team league guy, not really 12 or 10-team league compatible. But yeah, pretty good for the Fish. They got back 2 good players.
Yeah, both Birdie and Anderson, they swapped the doubleheader today on Saturday. Birdie started the first game. Anderson started in right field in the second game. And Wendell he took the loss in the first game with Birdie coming back, but was back in the leadoff spot, playing shortstop this time.
Who played shortstop?
Wendell played shortstop. He's been playing.
Wow.
He's had a couple games of shortstop in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so that would be nice eligibility to gain, as he already has. Obviously, he has all the infield eligibilities.
I didn't even know that. I didn't know he played shortstop.
So he led off again. So I was worried as a Wendell apologist that he might be the first man out. But with his versatility, playing third base, second base, shortstop on a pretty much every other day basis for each position, he may not always lead off moving forward when both him and Birdie are in the lineup, but he should keep as much of that playing time as possible.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our news and notes section for this episode. As always, I'm sure we missed a bunch of stuff worth noting. Keep up with all the news of the day. Make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast with Chad Young, Scott Chute, and Daniel Port. They break down the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Lee about basically the best sort of advice and analysis he comes across each week, as this week in fantasy baseball goes into not only what has happened on the field, but also the strategy analysis in a deep dive section of every episode. Before we do that, though, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
All right, guys, we are back. You, of course, are listening to On the Wire. I am Adam Howe, of course, joined weekly with Kevin Hasting, and today we are talking with Lee Keller of This Week in Fantasy Baseball podcast. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about, Lee, revolves around what you and John talk about on This Week, and that is like reading. I call this section Other People's Work. It's we got a book here in our library called Other People's Children. It's about teaching and stuff like that, but that's where I got that from. But what you guys do is you do a really good job of taking the analysis of other analysts, writers, whatever you want to call yourselves, well, enthusiasts really when it comes down to it, and not only regurgitating it with a synopsis, but also reanalyzing it in your own way and getting the information that they're providing to you guys, and again, adapting it to the kind of advice and analysis that you think is important. So that's what I want to talk to you about, is what's important. What do you find to be important in that information, especially as we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the episode, at this point of year, at the midway point of August, we've got about 7 weeks left, what have you, of scoring, that we're at the nitty gritty. I talked about narrowing down your focus about how many leagues you're actually focusing on, the ones you have competition in. I'm going to leave you with that open-ended question, but
Okay.
what do you find to be the most important information that you guys end up sending out to the world that can be the most useful?
So I think there's two sort of approaches I can go to answer this question. One being from my personal opinion as a fantasy baseball player, and I think the other one being as a fantasy baseball analyst or someone who gives people information about fantasy baseball. So me as a player, what I look at this point in the season, I pretty much, as everyone should, throw out all projections, throw out anything that you heard at the beginning of the season. Oh, this guy's going to hit 30 homers. This guy's going to hit 40, 20. None of that matters. None of that is relevant. It is a whole different ballgame now. We are over halfway through the season. What's going on is what's going on. Sure, people can maybe turn around and get to their projection points, but it's a whole different game. No one projected Aaron Judge for 60 home runs, and look what he's doing. So you have to really take that into effect of just, hey, if you think a guy is going to be good because of projections, that might not be true. That's not real. That's not tangible. For me as a player, I right now at this part of the season like to look at hot streaks. I like to look at trends. Someone like Lourdes Gurriel Jr., for instance, he's someone that is a September slugger. If he is not rostered in your league, I heavily recommend you pick him up for September, and you can thank me later, because every September for the last 3 years now, he's batted over 300 and hit the most home runs in a month that he's ever hit each of those seasons. So guys like that, just knowing those kind of trends, someone like Edwin Encarnacion back in the day, he was someone who always did better in the second half. You trade for him right before the All-Star break, and then he goes on a surge and wins you a championship. It's finding those sort of details. It's looking into a deeper layer of things. And you can look at people like Marcelo Zuna, for instance, who is someone that hits the ball extremely hard. All of his advanced statistics say, hey, this guy should be really good, but he's not doing that good. And he's done this before. And you could probably give up on him. Even though I'm a believer in him, I think that he's going to be good the rest of the season. He probably won't be, just because he hasn't been this whole season, even if all the advanced statistics aren't looking great. So I would definitely recommend for people at this point in the season to look at your team, analyze things, and get rid of all the fat. And by trimming the fat, get rid of just name value players that aren't performing well. It's the time to cut them. They're not doing well. They're not going to do well. Get rid of them. Pick up someone who's hot right now, like some of the guys we will talk about very soon that you might spend on your FAAB budget with. So that's really the end ifs for those. I would say that things to look at is Baseball Savant. Look at the pitcher list page for all of the details and stuff on that too. When you see a lot of red, that's good. A lot of blue, that's bad. Look into people's advanced statistics, because that is all registered now. All of that makes sense. All of that is tangible. It's all registered now in terms of sample sizes. So you can actually refer to Baseball Savant now and look at all the StatCast info and say, oh, this guy's hitting the ball hard. He's hitting home runs. He's doing good regularly. I should keep him. I should pick him up. I should do something like that. And then if you look at your guy who's doing well, I can't really pin an exact player, but you look at someone and there's a lot of blue and they're supposed to be really good. Joey Gallo, for instance, maybe I'll just throw that out there, who might be someone nowadays you might want to grab, but he's someone that, hey, oh, he's projected to hit 38 homers. He's not hitting 38 homers. He's not. I'm sorry. He's not. And if you look at the advanced statistics, if you still roster Joey Gallo hoping he might go on a tear, he could, but most likely he's not. Look at his advanced statistics. He's not doing what he normally does. It's just time here now to trim the fat and to look at things that matter. Hot streaks right now are the most important thing. I think cycling bats that are hot is the best way to ride to a championship or win in your championships, by just getting rid of those guys that you think are going to do well and replacing them with the guys who are currently doing well. And then replace that guy. If that guy falls off, get a new guy who's performing well. It happens every week. It's a never-ending cycle. So that's really the big part for fantasy advice that I can give people at this point in the season. That's what I try to tell people on This Week in Fantasy Baseball. And I love being able to take other people's work and showcase it and then give my opinion on it and give tidbits and information that people might not know alongside of it, because one analyst might not tell the whole story. They might have to focus in on one thing, but I can provide the other half of what's missing. And I take joy in that, because as a baseball fan, a fantasy baseball enthusiast, that's something I genuinely love doing. So that's my pleasure of being an analyst, to be able to help people win their leagues in that regard and just give them tidbits of information that they might have not known. So in general, there's a lot of different ways that you can decide what's useful and what's not. And projections at the beginning of the year, ATC from Ariel Cohen and Zips and all that stuff, it's great to look at. It's great to have. It's a great starting point. But at this point in the season, throw them out and look at what matters now. Who is providing stats now?
Yeah, as somebody who writes weekly for the Batter's Box column on Pitcher List as well, I can say those blurbs that we write, they could be one sentence, they could be 4 sentences, but yeah, to echo what you said, they're not going to tell you the whole story. So I like that when you guys dive deeper into 1 or 2 players from each of one of those articles, you're able to spread it out a little bit, stretch it out a little bit more. Kevin, something that Lee said at the very beginning was that what he recommends is you throw out the projections, especially the ones you look at the beginning of the year. There's a couple of projections that stand out to me that, at least on Fangraphs, they show you the rest of season, right? Like the Bad X we talk about a lot. Is that something that you are, when you're at this point in the season, are you looking at rest of season projections? Obviously not start of season projections.
Right.
You've probably deleted that spreadsheet by now, but the rest of season projections, is that still something that's useful to you, or is there something more specific that you're looking for when you're reading other people's work, when they're diving into something and they're providing you with information? What information are you hoping to get?
I definitely look at projections this time of year, rest of season, of course, because Lee mentioned the hot streaks. We talk about hot streaks a lot, and in my opinion, the value of hot streaks is it'll keep you in the lineup. That's about it. The rest of season projections are taking the overall talent and previous production of a player and taking our biases out, which are those hot streaks. They're taking our emotion and our biases out of the equation, and that's what I want to do. Max Muncy is a perfect example. They're dropping him in so many leagues not very long ago, looked at his rest of season projections, and they're like, nope. He's a better player than this. Injury probably has something to do with it. And now look at the last couple of weeks. He's hitting over 300 with 4 home runs and coming on. And expect him to do that the rest of the season. Projections have him from 9 home runs the rest of the season. So back to being the 30 home run guy we expect out of Max Muncy, where going by what he had done earlier in the year, we'd have thought about dropping him, and he probably was dropped in some shallower leagues for sure. I checked, he's not available in NFBC main events. If he was dropped, he was picked up as soon as he started turning it around a couple of weeks ago. Joey Gallo is interesting because we know Joey Gallo's not going to hit for average anyway. We brought it up last week when he did hit 270 for the first couple of months a couple of seasons ago. That means he's going to hit about 150 for a couple of months as well. It's going to regression. And if you look at his rest of season projections, that Bad X 190, 5 home runs, 15 RBI, 14 runs scored. That can be valuable if you can stomach that batting average. Much higher than the 165 he's hit so far this season, and that's what it's adjusting for. There's the regression back to his career 202 for the rest of the season.
Exactly.
So I absolutely do look at rest of season projections, and that's the reason. Take biases out, take what we're seeing and being influenced by the things. Derek Carty, the conversations I have had with him, and he's been here on the show, you got to take your personal biases out of the equation unless there is something you don't think those projections are taking into account, an injury, a change in approach, something along those lines. Then of course that can influence your decision. But yeah, I look at rest of season projections a lot.
That last part is so difficult to account for when you say, are you accounting for something that the projections are not? Because most of the good ones are. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. Right. They are accounting for the things that you think that they're not.
So injury is the big thing, though.
Of course. There's injuries. Right. And of course, like you might hear, but it's the thing is that those guys who are putting together these projections, they are reading all the same articles that we are, the news articles from the beat writers, from the press conferences. They know all that same information. So they're able to, with a unbiased view, like you say, Kevin, adjust if they find it to be necessary, those rest of season projections based on the same information that we have. And then they have a lot more information on top of that most of us are not privy to as far as statistical information and what have you. So something to consider.
Yeah. So when I say throw out your projections, the early season projections, preseason projections, obviously throw those out. And I don't like to look so much at rest of season projections. And once again, I believe that completely to be true with the throwing your biases aside. And that's why I said trim the fat. If a guy's not performing well, just get rid of him at this point, because you only have a few weeks left.
You don't have enough time to turn it around in most cases.
Exactly. And like you said earlier this podcast, some people have their playoffs now. And if you're looking at rest of the season projections for Max Muncy, like you said, 9 home runs on each of those things, maybe he doesn't even get to that point. Maybe someone's in the playoffs now and you can't do it. So it does depend on your league for the most part for rest of season projections. If you're playing for another 8 weeks, sure, rest of season projections are a little bit more valid and you can look at them and be more wary of them. But I'll take the under on the Max Muncy 9 home runs. I'll take the over on the Joey Gallo 5 home runs. I'll take the over on Tommy Pham hitting, I think it's 4 home runs and 4 stolen bases rest of the season, just because of trends. Like I said, I watched these trends happen, and Muncy 3 weeks ago is someone that John and I actually recommended dropping. And I think that it was valid then, of course, and he's doing great now. But I think the one thing that he was the whole season, like we were saying, is playing through an injury. I think he just never fully recovered from his last injury, which is why he was playing so poorly. And maybe he feels better now, and that's why he's doing better. But I don't buy it until I see it for at least 2-3 weeks. And if he falls off a cliff in the next 1 or 2 weeks, I much rather would have picked up, let's say, a Tommy Pham if he's out there than have Max Muncy or something like that. And that's what I mean by trimming the fat of, hey, if this guy's not doing well, you can, of course, look in your roto leagues, because it also matters with head-to-head and roto, right? Head-to-head, you can ride a little bit more hot streaks. Roto, you need those guys that are going to perform down the line that you can count on, like a Max Muncy for those 9 home runs. So it all matters in your league settings, but I think the key is just throw your biases aside. That's the big thing you can take from that is, if you're biased towards a player, don't be, because they don't care if you're sentimental towards them. Championships aren't sentimental. Once you win that championship, you can be sentimental, but get rid of those guys that are not doing anything for you. And if there's a better option out there, go and grab it before someone else does.
Yeah. And just for the record, Max Muncy and Joey Gallo both hit home runs today
They did. They did. Which is an awesome little tidbit there.
We did not revolve that conversation around that fact. Just making sure that everybody knows that. All right, guys. Yeah, really important. We talked about Kevin, especially since your run at the TGFBI Championship in 2020 shortened season. We talk about this ad nauseum about how, especially at this time of year, don't be afraid to cut players that aren't going to help you. And I always say you should not be paying for production that's already happened. You should only be paying for production that's going to be happening to the best of your knowledge. That being said, if you think somebody's going to be hurting you, cut bait. Simple as that, especially with the limited amount of time that we have going on. And I think that's really what it comes down to. This whole conversation kind of revolves around, and I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yep.
All right, Lee, that was great. Thanks for that extra insight. You guys want more of that insight, make sure you're listening to him and John over at This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Again, I say this about First Pitch, but you guys do a really good job of kind of synopsing a whole week's worth of information and not just one day. And so if you missed out on a couple episodes of that, First Pitch this week is where you want to be, just because it's anywhere between an hour and a half all at once. And you get it all. You get it on Friday going into your weekend. It can kind of set you up for the weekend. Also, almost a preview to what a lot of stuff we end up talking about here on the show, as well as you're talking about setting yourself up for the next week ahead. Speaking of setting us up for the week ahead, let's get into our player recommendations. Sometimes my segue rides are smoother and sometimes they're a little bumpy. I'm going to go with somewhere in between on that one. But let's get right into it. I liked it. Yeah, okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's get right into it. We got power starting us off with our hitting categories. I got a couple of guys here that I'm more going to ask you guys your opinion on them. I'm going to give you if or. So these are two guys that have been dropped pretty regularly over the course of the last couple of weeks. Franmil Reyes, who was dropped a whole lot after being DFA'd, or first being demoted and then DFA'd. And then Joey Gallo, who has been just incrementally dropped over the course of the last couple of weeks during his final tenure over in New York. They are now almost neck and neck in rostership across main events. Franmil Reyes batting fifth almost every day as the DH for the Cubs since being picked up by them. He is 55% rostered across main events. So these are those 15 teamers. Going to be much more readily available in your 12 teamers. Joey Gallo, 68% rostered in the main event with a little bit more time, maybe after the trade deadline, maybe people either holding on to him a little bit longer and or picking him back up after the trade. The news about Franmil came a little bit after that. So Not surprised that he's still available in a whole bunch more leagues, even with what seems to be pretty permanent playing time in Chicago. Kevin, if you need power, neither one of these guys are going to give you an average boost. It's all they're going to do is power. They're both hitting in the middle of their lineups. Obviously, one lineup is a little bit better than the other lineup. I get that. Which one? I'm assuming that if you need power, you're putting both of these guys at the very least in a waterfall bid. Who are you going to be happier to get, whether it's spending a lot of money on Joey Gallo because he's with the Dodgers and being okay with getting Franmil as your backup, or not spending a lot of money on both? Maybe Joey's still at your top of your list, but you feel a little bit more comfortable bringing down your price and being okay not getting Gallo and being happy that you got Reyes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They're both guys that will be probably not my top choice, but will be consolation bids, hopefully. Yeah, I think I lean Reyes just a little bit. I think he gets more playing time. There's only 2 games prior to today with the Cubs, but yeah, he's sitting in the middle of the order. They get Washington this week, Milwaukee for the weekend. Then they go to Milwaukee the following week. And the Dodgers, we know Joey Gallo is not going to face any lefties. And with it being the Dodgers, he won't even face all righties, probably. They shuffle guys in and out so much and have such depth that I just think Reyes is going to get more run. And if you are concerned about batting average, his typically will be a bit higher. And in fact, he has hit for a good average at times in his career. So yeah, I put Reyes a little higher on the list, but agree with you 100%. They should both be in there.
That's the beauty of a week like this, I think, is that you guys each have a bunch of guys that we're going to talk about here as options in the power category to know, and they're all outfield eligible except for one. And so you have these options that can fill in these gaps. And especially this time of year when we don't have a lot of FAAB. Most of us don't have a lot of FAAB in the leagues in which we are paying the most attention and spending the most money, obviously. It's nice to have all these backups you can put in there so that you don't have to spend triple digits, because you don't have triple digits in some cases. You can bid $15 across the board and be happy with, or at least be, whoever you get will be adequate to what you need to fill. You're not putting all your eggs into one basket, really needing to fill that spot. Then Kevin, I'm going to roll back around to you in a second, but Lee, let's get your recommendation here for a power source in a space that might be available.
Yeah, so I'm a Mets fan. I don't like to talk about the Mets frequently, and I'm going to mention, I believe, 2 moving forward. But Daniel Vogelbach, I think, is a really good option right now if you need power, homers, RBI. I think that he is someone that is an everyday bat in that Mets lineup. He is in a DH platoon with Darren Ruff at the moment, but Vogelbach's played pretty much every game except for 1 or 2 so far. And they're really trying to get his bat in the lineup because he's been taking such good at bats. His eye is incredible at the plate. And if you looked at him, you wouldn't think that. You would think that he just mashes and gets out and that's it. But this season so far, he has a 245 batting average, 359 OBP, 450 slug, and an 810 OPS. But with the Mets, in only 16 games, 45 at-bats total, he's got 2 home runs, 10 RBI, and a 1020 OPS. So he's been really good with the Mets. He hit a grand slam once. He's gotten a few doubles that drove in a few. He's been really good. He's batting 4th or 5th regularly for the Mets. Like I said, he's in a platoon with Darren Ruff, but you don't see many lefties on the mound. You're going to see more righties. Vogelbach's going to get more of the playing time, and they're going to really try to get his bat in the lineup as much as possible because I really think they like what he's bringing to that lineup, just to bridge the gap between someone like a Francisco Lindor to a Jeff McNeil. Just getting on base is huge. It's the Moneyball meme all over. What does he do? He gets on base. We want him in the lineup. Get him there. I think Vogelbach is someone who is going to help you down the stretch. He had a season in 2019. I believe he went 30 homers and 76 RBI. And that was with the Mariners, I believe. And I think he could just give you a good source of power for the rest of the season. I think he's relatively cheap for FAAB bids. So if you need a first baseman or a sneaky source of power in a util spot, Vogelbach might be the guy.
The other Moneyball meme is getting a lot of run right now as well, and it's getting really close to being annoying. I'm just gonna throw that out there. The one where it's got him pointing at the dry erase board. Yep. And just, hey, here's Daniel Vogelbach. He's great at hitting home runs. The negative thing is that your waffle source will always be empty with him on your team. So it's a good meme. Just saying, there are other memes.
It's getting overused.
There are other choices. All right, cool. Kevin, let's roll it back around to you. Who were the options you actually wanted to talk about?
Yeah, sticking with the Mets. And I agree with Lee here. And part of the reason is that they have an 8-game week upcoming. It appears 6 of those 8 will be versus right-handed starters. So Tyler Naquin, he is 94% rostered in main events, but in less than half of online championships and less than 20% of Yahoo leagues. With the Mets, only 34 plate appearances, but hitting .333, slugging .788. He's got 3 home runs, 2 doubles, and 2 triples in just 34 plate appearances. On the season versus right-handed pitching, 187 plate appearances, so a pretty nice sample there, 281, and nearly all of his counting stats: 8 home runs, 35 RBI, 31 runs scored, .538 slugging percentage, all 14 of his walks, and all 4 of his stolen bases, obviously getting on base more in his plate appearances versus the righties. So I love him this coming week with the 6 games versus right-handed pitching. And for deeper leagues, I'm looking at Trace Thompson for the Dodgers. He's got 115 plate appearances with the Dodgers, now back with them. I really liked him a few years ago. He never really panned out with them. He's now back with them, getting playing time against lefties. The Dodgers face 4 left-handed pitchers, it appears, this coming week. He's hit 300 with the Dodgers, slugging .560. And so this looks like a nice week of matchups for him as well, especially when you get to the weekend where they're playing 3 home games versus Miami, all 3 versus left-handed starters, it appears, at this moment in time. So in NFBC formats, definitely a nice fill-in for the second half of the week. And I should have scrolled down in my notes when we were talking about Franmil Reyes versus Joey Gallo earlier. This just adds to the putting Franmil a little bit ahead of Gallo for me, with the Dodgers facing those 4 left-handed starters this week.
Yeah, I would actually like to say too, Vogelbach is rostered in 28% of 12-team satellite leagues on NFBC and 10% in Yahoo, so easily accessible. And I completely agree with everything Kevin said. That's one of the reasons why Joey Gallo is probably taking a backseat to Franmil. I like Franmil more in general. I just think that he's going to provide more. They provide pretty much the same thing. You want the same thing out of Gallo and Reyes, and if Reyes is going to be playing more, that's the no-brainer right there.
Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah, 20% of your satellite leagues, I looked it up to 25% in online championships. So in that larger pool of teams, still same 1 out of 4 only rostered. So plenty of Vogelbachs available in those 12 teamers. All right, let's move on to our speed options. I'm going to throw out some players here, just the guys that I've either kept an eye on or picked up as well. Love to get your guys' take on them as well. But Jake McCarthy's been picked up quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, especially in the 15-teamers. Still readily available, though, in your 12-teamers. Single-digit rostership across Yahoo. 62% rostership in the online championships. So still over 2/3 of leagues still available out there. Sorry, in over 1/3 of leagues still available out there as well. Leading off on days that Josh Rojas does not lead off for Arizona. I picked him up just for this weekend in a daily move league, just because, of course, they're playing in Colorado. But he's been stealing bases like crazy. He's playing every day in the outfield for Arizona. Playing time is key. If so facto, you want a guy like that in your lineup, especially if you're desperate for stolen bases. And Jake Fraley just came across my radar again, about this time every year, another guy like that. But the thing that stood out to me the most, not only is he stealing bases for the Reds, he's playing almost every day there. He is now potentially leading off for them with Jonathan India being hurt. Fraley led off today on Saturday, went 3 for 4, scored 2 runs. Obviously, that's the smallest of small sample sizes, 1 single game. But if India does miss some more time, Fraley very well, at least he put himself in a situation, Kevin, as you said, hot streaks are only going to keep you in the lineup. Hopefully this one single day hot streak keeps Fraley in the top of the lineup on a regular basis.
Exactly.
So even with Cincinnati, he's going to score runs at the top of that lineup. And Fraley has wheels on him for days. He can definitely steal some bases for you. So these are guys that I got an eye on, especially Fraley, who's 62% rostered in the main event. He's readily available in your 12-teamers as well.
For McCarthy, he's stolen 3 bases since August began. So he's definitely a good source of sneaky lower tier speed. And then also Jake Fraley, yeah, he can steal a lot of bases, but I think he only has 1 or 2 this season, but he hasn't had the playing time. And now that he's got the playing time, he can have a nice source of power and speed that's not very rostered. So
yeah, he has the 1 stolen base.
1, okay, yeah.
Which came back in April, so the beginning of the season. He definitely has the ability. He hasn't shown it yet, but that may very well keep his price down. He has 10 stolen bases through 265 plate appearances last year with Seattle. So he has that ability for sure. Only 2 caught stealing. So he should have a green light if given the right opportunities on the base pass. If not these guys, then Lee, who are you looking at to hopefully steal some bases? And I always say, or score some runs, because that's part of the speed category as well.
Yeah, Nicky Lopez of the Royals, who around this time last year went on a glorious run for you in fantasy leagues. He was someone that really took off and started performing extremely well. Last season, he, in the second half, had 22 stolen bases for the whole year, but in August, September, and October, he had a batting average over 310 and stole 14 bases. So that's just in 2 months and a little bit of time, 14 stolen bases and a 310 batting average or higher. So Nicky Lopez for me is someone that is readily available, 43% rostered in NFBC 12-team satellite leagues, 8% on Yahoo. I don't really like the guys that provide 0 power and only give you speed. I'm not a guy who rosters that sort of archetype of player. But if you need speed, if you just need to catch up in the speed category for Roto, or if you're trying to get a leg up in your head-to-head leagues over someone who might not have a speedy team, Nicky Lopez has a good amount of people coming up for his next week in the games. He's looking okay for that. He's predominantly batting 9th, but that's giving him the green light no matter what, because that's all he brings to the table is speed and runs. And that bridges it to the top of the order. And the top of the order has pretty decent hitters, MJ Melendez, Salvador Perez. So they can knock in Nicky Lopez, no problem. He can score runs. He's got a bunch of position eligibilities, 2nd, 3rd, and short. So I think Nicky Lopez is a great move right now if you need to catch up on speed, because you saw what you could do last season, 14 stolen bases in 2 months.
I'm just happy you threw the MJ Melendez name drop, so I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Week. Kevin, how's Lopez been looking with the new look Royals lineup?
Obviously, Salvador Perez is the leader of the Kansas City Royals, but Nicky Lopez has taken over that role in Salvador Perez's absence at times, and also just in general with the younger players. He knows them. He's played with them as recently as 2 or 3 seasons ago. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. He's got 6 stolen bases in the second half. He had 5 in the first half. And that has a lot to do with the Royals as a team and playing Salvador Perez and a whole bunch of young guys. That's their lineup now, and they're turning them all loose. It does help that he is getting on base better than he was the first half of the season. It was interesting. When Lopez first came up, he did not attempt any stolen bases when he was hitting horribly. And I think the Royals just shut him down. They concentrate on your hitting, concentrate on your defense. They didn't even have him attempting any stolen bases, because he was a great hitter in the minor leagues. He always hit for a high average. And once he began doing that at the major league level, then they started to turn him loose. It appears they're doing that again as he has improved at getting on base here later in the season.
Well, Nicky Lopez, as you mentioned, some of the other rostership, 34% rostered in the online championship, 96% roster across main events. So there are, 2 main event leagues out there where he is just sitting there waiting to be bid on. So be curious to see the results page on who needs stolen bases the most in those main event leagues. Kevin, you got a couple names on here worth discussing. So who are your speed options for this week?
Yeah, my first one's Adam Frazier. He's universally rostered in the 15-team main events, but he, like Tyler Naquin, he's available in over half of the 12-team online championships, and he hits leadoff for a pretty good lineup, and he's got 4 stolen bases hitting in that leadoff spot over the past month or so. So they're turning him loose a little bit. For deeper leagues, Luke Williams in Miami doesn't play every day. This is a deep league play where you don't need any power out of the lineup spot. You are just looking for a couple of stolen bases to move up in the rankings. As it's getting to the time of year where there are some leagues where that's the type of guy we're looking for. He averages less than 2 plate appearances per game played. So a lot of pinch hitting, late game replacement. Once in a while he'll get a start. I expect him to probably get a start or 2 this week. Miami does face a couple of I believe 3 lefties this week. So he could get in there. He could relieve Joey Wendell for a day at third base, give him a day off, something along those lines. In every one of the scoring periods over the past 2 months, other than the shortened All-Star break week, he has given us a stolen base. So when we're streaming guys like this, we've said this before, Adam, if he gets us a stolen base, that's a 26 stolen base guy in our lineup over a 26-week season. So this is a guy that this could be a pretty good week for a guy like him. It has been each of the last 6 or 7 weeks other than the half All-Star break week. So he's getting us a stolen base a week. And we could throw him in. Maybe not quite yet for some teams. Maybe you still need the power out of your guys. He's going to be available. He's only 11% rostered in 15-team main events. He's available everywhere else. So it gets closer to the end of the season, and it's just a couple of stolen bases could help you. He's a guy to keep in mind.
The fact that he's rostered in 2% of online championships is impressive. All right. All right, let's talk about the schedule ahead as we move into our opportunity section, guys. Obviously, we're going to be talking about guys that have good matchups ahead. Maybe they have a lot of games or got plate appearances, what have you. So some of that is going to be impacted by their schedule. So there's a whole bunch of teams that have a 7-day work week. Honestly, I'm not going to go. I listed them all here on my sheet. I'm not going to list them all. It's more than half the league. So you should be looking at the teams that don't have a 7-game work week. And there's no teams that have 2 off days next week, which is a nice change of pace from last week. The Mets and the Phillies, as Kevin talked about earlier, they have a doubleheader on Saturday. That gives the Mets 8 games. The Phillies still get 7 games despite the off day on Thursday. So it's nice that they have that extra day over the weekend. Same with Cleveland and Detroit. They have a doubleheader on Monday. So that does give them 7 games on the week. They both have an off day on Thursday as well. So Cleveland and Detroit will still have 4 games in the bi-weekly lineup shifts that the NFBC implements. Colorado does have a rare split week, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. They'll have 3 away at St. Louis, and then they will be hosting 3 with San Francisco in Colorado to end the weekend. So luckily you'll be able to switch out your hitters, as Kevin would beg you to do midway through the week. All right, with all that stuff in mind, Kevin, who might you be focusing on specifically due to either the schedule or the matchups they have ahead?
Yeah, I really like Derek Hall this week, and it's not as much about the Phillies schedule. It is about the Mets schedule. When they play that 4-game series next weekend, the Phillies are going to miss both DeGrom and Scherzer, it appears. And 3 of the 4 starting pitchers will be righties, which Derek Hall is better against. He's obviously somebody we can use for power. He's slugging .548 on the season in his 315 plate appearances. Excuse me, that was at AAA. He's slugging .575 at the MLB level this season, even better.
And he got over 300 plate appearances already. That's impressive.
Yeah, just 119.
Yeah,
he's the guy for me this week, especially for the weekend versus the Mets. As I said, pretty fortunate to have a 4-game series versus the Mets and not have to face Scherzer or DeGrom when they are both healthy.
Yes. You applaud and thank whoever made that happen. You be done with it and don't ask any other questions.
The problem is they're facing them right now. They faced Scherzer on Friday. They faced DeGrom on Saturday. They're going through it right now, and then they luckily get to avoid it again, because imagine if they had to run through them twice. Oh, my God. Disaster.
All right, Lee, who do you got looking at as far as guys that might have good matchups ahead for this coming week or just even part of the week?
Yeah, so another Philly, Bryson Stott, he's been doing pretty well. He's someone that's deeper. And once again, echoing the same sentiments that Kevin did, is that They're facing a bunch of righties. Bryson Stott's a lefty. He's been really hot as of recent. He's actually just set a record. He's the only person to ever reach base 4 times against Max Scherzer. That's pretty
in the
crazy.
same game. But yeah, I saw that. That was impressive.
Yeah, of course. If you just did it over the course of a career, a lot of people have done that. But in one game, Bryson Stott. So really interesting that Bryson Stott's flourishing, because he was someone that got an early call, so to speak. He was someone that didn't go through a rigorous minor league system. So he came up and he's doing well now. So Bryson Stott's one of the deep guys. And as we mentioned before, people like Trace Thompson when you're facing a bunch of left-handed pitching, or Joey Gallo against right-handed pitching. But this week, I think the Phillies are one of the better because they have 7 games. They get mostly righties, and Derek Hall, who mashes righties, and Bryson Stott, who's been playing really well. I think that's just a good combination to get you through the week.
Worth mentioning, it might not last into next week, obviously, with Schwarber coming back, but with Schwarber missing the last 2 days worth of games, Stott has led off. He's been moved to the leadoff spot for the Phillies as well. So if that were to stick, or at least his recent production were to move into that role in the lineup, obviously that's going to make a big difference. Obviously with Didi Gregorius leaving, Gene Shikara coming back and playing second base every day, Stott has been playing shortstop every single day, minus 1 sit against a lefty in recent history. So getting it plenty of plate appearances, regardless if he's at the top of the lineup or back in the 6th hole, which is where he spends most of his time.
I don't know why they haven't changed the order to be Stott, Segura, Schwarber. That makes a lot of sense to me, but once again, I'm not in a position of power, but I don't know why that's not the order, because Schwarber's missing out on tons of RBI, hitting 39 homers or whatever in the leadoff spot, and Harper being out, that's the big thing. But then you put those guys, then you have Hoskins, then you have Derek Hall, you have JT Realmuto. The lineup kind of seems lengthier, but when you have Segura batting 6th, Stott 1, Schwarber 1, Stott 9, it's weird. I don't know. I don't like the lineup construction. I like it right now.
As a Mets fan, you're probably fine with it, like the way that
I want all of their players to be off the field. I want them to actually forfeit the games before they even take the field. So yeah, that's definitely.
All right, guys, let's move into some pitching options. We are going to get back into our future 2-start section. We skipped those last 2 weeks, I think, but now we're getting back into somewhat of a more predictable schedule. Obviously, injuries and other things will change that as we go. But for now, I gave you guys a good little list of, I think, about 12 or 15 players, pitchers that are rostered in 50% or less of Yahoo leagues, who as of right now look like they could be lining themselves up for a 2-start week. Not this week, but the following week. So if you bid on them now, you can get them a little bit cheaper if they are available in your leagues. Might be somebody worth considering. Kevin, who of this list, who are you the most interested in based on whatever reasons? And then who do you think the field will be interested in that you're going to be straying away from?
I am so happy you asked me first. And I apologize to Lee, because there is a matchup in the 2 of the following week that worries me for every one of these guys except one. And that's the guy at the top of the list. That's Kyle Gibson. I'll take Cincinnati out of Great American Small Park. He gets them at home, and he also gets Pittsburgh at home. Without diving into any numbers on any of the pitchers themselves, that's the only one with 2 good matchups. So that's my choice.
There you go. All right. Regardless of matchups, then, all right, give me another pitcher then that's on the list that you think, based on name, based on production, based on whatever, that the field is going to be looking at, that you're just being like, no, just because they have a 2-step, I'm not interested in.
Nick Lodolo, I think I have him on some teams and I like him, but going to Philadelphia, we just talked about their lineup a little bit, but facing them in Cincinnati and then going back to Philadelphia to face them again, in spite of getting that second matchup against Washington, which is really nice. I think that will draw people in, but I don't like that first matchup at Philly.
Yeah, you've got to assume, I know that I think there's been quite a bit of little research done on this, but like when a pitcher faces a team and then they go back and face that same team, who that actually affects them more. Is it better for the hitters because they've got to see the pitcher longer, or does it affect the pitcher in a positive way because they get a better feel for the same group of hitters, most likely 8 out of the 9 guys at least in the same lineup? I venture to guess that it does more for the hitters, if I'm just completely guessing.
I think most of that research shows it's pretty close, really close. But with Lodolo being the young guy here,
sure,
That's what worries me. Like, how much is he going to change things up? Or is he going to think, oh, this worked against this guy last time? So that's what worries me.
All right, Lee, since Kevin took the low-hanging fruit here, I'm going to put you on the spot. Besides Kyle Gibson, who might be somebody you at least is worth picking up now, stashing? Whether you start him this week or not is irrelevant, but you're really looking ahead at that possible two-step.
Yeah, so Kyle Gibson, obviously the low-hanging fruit. I was going to say Nick Lodolo as well. I like Nick Lodolo a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential. Out of everybody on this list, I like his stuff and potential the most out of everybody. So regardless of matchup, just the raw talent, I'd rather have Lodolo. But if I had to pick someone other than Lodolo, I'd probably go Domingo Germán if you're looking for wins. He's on the Yankees. He gets Tampa Bay, who hasn't been doing too well. They're not an overwhelming offense this year. They get Oakland. They get the Mets, which is the tough matchup, of course. But Tampa Bay and Oakland don't really scare me. Germán's decent enough to go 5, not give up a lot of runs. I like that the most. And if you're in a quality start league, just a quick shout out to Zach Plesac. You get the Tigers, the Padres, and the Mariners. At least he might go 6 and might only give up 3. Who knows? But Plesac's been serviceable this year as anything. But the one person I would avoid, if I'm going to just throw an avoid out there, is Daniel Lynch against the Twins, the White Sox, and the Padres. Just avoid him. Don't go anywhere near that. The White Sox are good against lefties. The Padres are pretty good against lefties. Don't do Daniel Lynch. Not that one. No.
That's probably fair. Sorry, Kevin.
Oh, I agree.
He's saying sorry, Kevin, quite a bit.
As nice it is as it has been for the young Kansas City pitchers to start to look like they're may end up being what we hoped they would be, I agree with those matchups.
All right, let's look a little bit closer ahead here with just going into this coming week. Wins and Ks. Lee, I'm going to let you start us off on this one. We're looking at counting categories for pitchers, typically, obviously, in your 5x5s. That's wins and strikeouts. Who are you looking at for picking up this week, assuming you're going to be starting them this coming week?
Yeah, so my main one is Aaron Savale of the Guardians. He's 16% roster on NFBC, 12-team satellites, 19% on Yahoo. He's got a 2-start August 15th against Detroit and then August 21st against the White Sox. As I just mentioned before, the White Sox are not good against right-handed pitching. They're much better against lefties. So, especially with Luis Robert possibly being out of the lineup, I don't really see anything that scares me in the White Sox lineup, especially with Tim Anderson being out as well. Their lineup's a little bit depleted. And Detroit's just one of the worst offenses in the league. So I really like that option. Now, Savale's been horrible this season. He's had a 6.05 ERA, a 141 whip. He's had 56 Ks and 58 innings pitched, which is a little bit outlandish for him. He's usually not a very big strikeout pitcher, but he gets 2 cushy matchups, like I said. He wasn't great against the Tigers the last time out. He only went 4 innings, had 4 strikeouts, a 4.50 ERA with a 75 whip. I think he could at least go 5 innings pitch against both of these teams, strike out a batter per inning, and not give up more than 3 runs. So in that sense, for someone that you just want to pick up and get a good 2 starts out of, I think Savale is one of the safer options. I'm a big Savale fan. I wrote a whole thing about how he's going to be the next breakout guy like 2 years ago, and then he had a decent season, and then he stunk. But I like Savale a lot. I think Savale is a very decent option, especially with these 2 matchups, not scaring me at all. And then just a quick shout out to Mitch Keller, who he was doing really well. Before his last start, he had a quality start streak of 5. So he's been really good. And one was even at Coors Field. One was against the Phillies. He's been okay. His strikeouts have not been where you want it to be, 91 Ks and 112 innings pitched. But he goes against the Red Sox on August 16th, and then he goes against the Reds on August 21st. And the Red Sox are 14th highest in strikeouts for a team, and the Reds are 6th. So if you're looking for some strikeouts, maybe he can provide that for you in that 2-start week.
Yeah, Mitch Keller, 100% roster across main events, but still readily available in your 12-teamers. You tend to reference 61% roster across online championships. Aaron Savale still out there, though, in main events as well. 89% rostered across main event leagues. So even those 15-teamers, he's going to be an option in about 10% of those leagues out there. So as we always say, it doesn't hurt to check. Just type in the name, Control F, whatever you need to do. If he pops up, great. If he doesn't, move on. Simple as that.
Yep.
Kevin, who you got starting for you next week in your FAAB bids for counting stats and for pitchers?
Yeah, this is mostly for the few 12-team leagues where he's available, and then less, of course. But Jose Quintana has a couple of really nice matchups this week. He's universally rostered in main events, but surprisingly available in 18% of online championships. I expect that to be 0 by the end of Sunday evening, with getting the Rockies on the road. He gets them at home in St. Louis. Not only that, it's their first road game after a long homestand, even better. And then he goes to Arizona, who their team OPS versus lefties is bottom third of the league. So 2 really nice matchups. We've brought up Quintana several times throughout this season, and every time I brought him up, I had to say, but not if you're after wins. It is the Pirates. That's not the case anymore. I fully expect at least 1 win, and 2 is a legitimate shot this week for Quintana.
All right, guys, we talked enough about our counting stats here. Let's move into our ratios as we continue to try to chip away at those things. Kevin, bounce it right back to you here. Who's got your eye that, again, we typically will throw out a bunch of relievers in here, middle relievers that might get you 2 or 3 innings. Might be a starter who is just not chipping away at strikeouts, but you can rely on them to put together 4 to 6 innings of 1-run ball. What direction are you going in this week for the ratios?
Yeah, I'm looking at the newly acquired Scott Effross for the Yankees. He only has 1 appearance with them that was more than 3 outs. However, it does appear he's going to get 3 innings or more a week. This weekend pending still. He's only had 2 1-inning appearances thus far this week, but I expect he gets used over the weekend. So 3 innings out of him a week with his 2.94 ERA and 54 strikeouts and 49 innings pitched on the year allows those to add up as well when we're looking for ratios here, but having a guy that with over a strikeout per inning on the season in that role helps as well.
All right, Lee, you going in the same direction for that middle reliever, or are you looking at a starter that can chip away at some ratios?
I'm also looking at a middle reliever, and I'm actually very happy that Kevin picked Effross because I was between the guy I'm about to talk about and him. So very cool that it actually worked out that way. Just going into the next segment, I was going to possibly talk about Aroldis Chapman, but he's way too rostered because Clay Holmes has been on the fringe. He's been horrible. So maybe even Effross or Chapman takes over that closer role and maybe get you some saves. But regardless, my choice here is Andres Munoz of the Mariners. I think he has had a fantastic season so far. He's at a 2.72 ERA, a 93 whip. He's had 71 strikeouts and 46.1 innings pitched. He's been really good this season, and he's only rostered in 25% of NFBC satellite leagues, 12-team, 19% on Yahoo. He's been great for saves plus holds leagues. He's been getting a lot of holds. He's only gotten 2 saves, and he's had 16 holds, so more in the hold category. But in terms of just ratios, he mainly pitches in the 6th or 7th, so he's able to snipe a win. He's only gotten, I think, 1 win this season so far, but he pitches in a scenario where you could get more wins and benefit from that. So he's been reliable the whole time. He goes multiple innings. He usually gets about 3 to 5 outs every time he goes out there, and he pitches multiple times in a week. Last week, he pitched 4 times. So he pitched, I believe it was 4.2 innings pitched last week. So he's been really good overall and just reliable. And I think if you're looking for someone to get you ratios, give you strikeouts, lower those things, and possibly even snipe you a win, Andres Munoz has been so good for the Mariners. The Mariners has been a great team for sources of saves and holds this year with Sewald and Munoz and other options they've got out there too.
All right, Lee, I'm going to let you segue us right into our final pitching category. Of course, that's saves. As you mentioned, Munoz kind of borderlines on that option for Seattle as well. So who are you looking at that is more solidified in the save category?
Yeah, and another one where Kevin is going to talk about someone I was between these two as well. So this is working out very perfectly here. It's a well-oiled machine around here. My choice is Rowan Wick. I was actually really surprised to see his roster rate being so low. I don't know what it is in the main event, and I'd love for you to tell me in a minute, Adam. But in satellite leagues on NFBC, he's 52% rostered, and on Yahoo, he's 30% rostered. And he's the actual closer for the Cubs. Like, he's the guy. He's not a guy that's waiting. He's not a guy who's backing up a struggling guy. He's the guy, and he's readily available. So I don't know about the main event, which probably closer to 100%, but Rowan Wick is a guy that's been really good as of recently. Since Robertson got traded to the Phillies, it gave Wick the opportunity to be the closer. he's run with it. His stats for the year look pretty bad with a 3.94 ERA and a 1.65 whip. He's got 50 strikeouts, though, and 48 innings pitched. 3 wins, 7 saves on the season. But the big note here is since August 8th, he has 3 saves. So in, what is that, 5 days, 6 days? I'm terrible at math. But he's gotten 3 saves in that time. And 4 straight scoreless outings, 6 Ks and 3.1 innings pitched. He looks good right now, widely available. Cubs aren't a great team, but they have an easier schedule with the Nationals coming up. So save opportunities could be plentiful.
Yeah, you're talking about him in the saves category here, not the ratios category. Don't worry about it.
Yep, exactly. He's getting you saves, but he's also helping your ratios at the moment, not the rest of the year. At the moment.
Yeah. We'll take it. 100% rostered across the main event, 75% rostered across online championships, a little bit less rosterships across your satellites you're talking about, but still readily available in most cases, at least 1 out of 4 leagues in the online. So again, check your options. Kevin, who's picking up a save for some of your teams this coming week?
First of all, right back to Lee, because Rowan Wick is who I was going with because of that 75% in online championships with 3 saves this week, Adam. Yeah. Not many people in many leagues have much FAAB left, but that's where it's going in the leagues he's available, right? 3 saves in a week. The first 6 days of the week, we still have the weekend to finish out. Rowan Wick in those 25% of online championship leagues is going to go for a lot of money relatively to what people have left for this season. And I'm going the other direction in Arizona because after all the talk about Arizona being closer by committee, it seems like it's not. It doesn't seem like the closer changed. It's still Mark Melancon.
I'm just had the day off.
It's so true. And I thought it was going to be Ian Kennedy, and it was for a couple of days before they put Melancon right back in the role. Kennedy pitched the 9th inning today in a 6-0 victory. So that's not good when we're looking at closers. I think Melancon has his job back. Arizona not going to win a lot of games, but they do have a lot coming up. So the percentage doesn't have to be really high. They have a 7-game week ahead, so hopefully a couple of save opportunities for Melancon, who was dropped in a lot of places 2 and 3 weeks ago when we thought he had lost the job.
Yeah, to be fair on Kennedy's part, he hadn't pitched in 5 days, so getting him some time on the mound is a thing. With that being said, 6-0 victory in Colorado's not something you want to see. If you just want him to get some time on the mound, put him in the 6th inning or the 7th inning. Don't put him at the end of a game of a blowout. All right. The final section, my favorite one, our wild card section. I'm throwing out a name without a lot of background here. It's just Wander Franco is available in your league. He's about to start a rehab assignment. It might take him 2 weeks to finish out that assignment, but if you want him, you got to get him now. He's 25% rostered in online championships, 81% in the main event, so still almost 20% of those leagues. He is on the wire, available to be picked up. Obviously, there's a hamate issue. Everybody's worried about the power. I trust Tampa Bay more than some, I think, as far as bringing back somebody from an injury like that the right way. But at the same time, you're also not necessarily picking up Wander Franco for the power output. It's not a Matt Olson situation or what have you. You're picking him up for the everyday playing time, the average boost, and maybe just in the counting stats on top of that. You're not necessarily picking him up to hit a bunch of home runs in the final couple of weeks of the season. So Wander Franco, we talked about with Gene Segura 2 or 3 weeks ago. Guys are coming back from these rehab stints. If you want them now is the time to strike. You guys have some guys on here that are a little bit more readily available. So Lee, I'm going to Kevin, I'm going to let you start us off so Lee can finish us off. Kevin, who might you be looking at if your roster is flexible enough to take them on?
I just talked about that 7-game week that Arizona has upcoming, and I actually had hit these notes down before he hit 2 home runs today. I promise. But Emmanuel Rivera is playing well after his move to Arizona and very readily available, as you said, only 2% rostered in the main event, 1% in both online championships and on Yahoo. But with that 7-game week upcoming and him being in the lineup most days, especially against lefties, but most days, I think Rivera, he's got 10 home runs now on the season and a little over 200 plate appearances. Little simple math. This is a close to 30 home runs. Let's say 25. Let's not go 30, but a 25 home run hitter over a full season that is readily available. It wasn't long ago. I think what we have discussed a lot today without actually bringing it up, many of the different categories that we talked about, there's a lot of power out there available right now. About a month ago, there was a lot of talk that it wasn't as readily available as it is most seasons, and it was hard to come by. All of a sudden, it seems like there's plenty of power out there right now. And Emmanuel Rivera is just another option. Like you would say often, Adam, you put him for $1 at the bottom of your bid list. And if he's who you end up with in a 7-game week, I'd be fine with it.
All right, sounds good. Lee, finish us off here with your wild card selection. Again, if your roster allows and or is flexible enough for it.
Yeah, I took wild card a bit serious here, and I went with
as you should. Thank you.
Yeah, a pure flyer bench stash sort of guy. And once again, just speaking about a Met. Sorry, everybody. Mark Vientos, who is a third baseman / shortstop prospect for the Mets. He's 2% rostered on Yahoo, which is wild. And he's not in the NFBC directory, which I think that's right. I looked and I couldn't find him, so I don't think he's there.
Yeah, he hasn't made his debut yet, so he would not be eligible.
It has to go in the system after. Okay. That's what I figured.
That 2% is leagues like Adams, where they're actually running their league on Google Sheets.
Yeah, with Dynasty and whatnot, 100%. But Vientos is someone that the Mets were considering calling up at the trade deadline. And then they acquired Darren Ruff, which kind of negates the need for Vientos to be called up right now. But his name was being thrown around in trade rumors. And he's still with the team and he's ready. He's got a 267 batting average, a 351 OBP, and a 517 slug in AAA with 19 homers and 56 RBI in 79 games. So that's a legitimate power bat right there. He could get the call up when rosters expand. There's not really much depth in the right-handed hitting sort of vibe for the Mets outside of Darren Ruff. Either one of Tomas Nido or James McCann or the other righty off the bench, and that's not really a serviceable pinch-hitting batter. Hey, Mark Vientos, it's a wild card, but he could get playing time if Guillorme or Lindor or Escobar need a day off since he's third base and shortstop, and he's a legitimate power bat. He can actually do some damage, so if there's someone that you want to stash away and hope that he gets called up and just comes out the gate roaring, I like Mark Vientos.
All right, guys, these are... Lee, thank you for taking the assignment and rolling with it. I appreciate it.
I read wild card and I said wild card.
He understood the assignment, everybody. I appreciate it. All right, with that note, Kevin, I'm going to let you close us out with any added words of wisdom for those who may be looking for heading into the final stretch run, if you will.
About 7 weeks to go. Not nearly that long before head-to-head playoffs. I'm not really stashing anymore at any position. If you have Mike Trout, of course, you're holding on. If you have Bryce Harper, probably still holding on and hoping for the best. Might get him at the end of the playoffs or for the final month or so of the roto season. But beyond that, if guys aren't useful for me this week, then I really probably need that roster spot for someone that could be. The 2-start pitchers, as we went through, there really wasn't a lot of appealing options for this weekend. For 2 weeks from now, still might be having a spot for a guy like that as you head down the stretch. As a 2-start week for a guy can be valuable. So having a spot taken up in a week you won't use him still makes sense. But for the most part, no more stashing. We've seen too many injuries on Mondays and Tuesdays, NFBC style formats, where we can switch our guys out on Friday if we have them available on our roster. And so I'm not using those spots for stashes any longer.
Stashing season is over, apparently, for Kevin.
And Mark Vientos just got really sad.
All right, on that note, Lee, I want to thank Lee Keller, of course, for joining us this week. Lee, man, thanks for coming, man. This has been a great time. And let everybody remind everybody where they can find you, where they can listen to you, what you have working before the end of the season, and any other information that is worth sharing about you.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for having me on. I can't believe I made it through this, because when you told me I was going to be a guest on the Wire podcast, I binge watched the entire show, The Wire, and I know so many things. I actually just made up everything I said during this baseball podcast. I have no idea about baseball. I was expecting to talk about The Wire this whole time with Jimmy McNulty and everything, so I can't believe I made it through it. But thank you all so much for having me. Kevin and Adam, you guys are awesome, so thank you for having me. If anyone wants to follow me anywhere, it's at Regicidal, Instagram, Twitter, anything. REGICIDAL. Follow me on Twitch, all those things. You can follow me there. You can check out my work on Pitcher List. Just search my name. I only have 2 articles, but my main source of damage on Pitcher List is through the podcast network, where I co-host a podcast called This Week in Fantasy Baseball. We go over everything in the week of fantasy baseball, quite literally, as the title says. And we talk about all the things on Pitcher List. We interview Pitcher List writers. We deep dive players. We review all of the articles, the SP Roundup, SP Streamers, the Batter's Box. There's so much fantastic work coming out of Pitcher List. And the fact that we get to highlight it and give our own opinions as analysts is incredible. So please go and watch or listen to that show, and we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you for having me once again. It's been a real blast.
That's awesome. Yeah, Lee, thanks again for joining us. That's going to wrap it up, guys, for episode 72 of On the Wire. Make sure you subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. We'll be back every Sunday with detailed FAAB breakdowns throughout the rest of the 2022 season. Of course, keep a lookout for Kevin's companion article over at pitcherlist.com. That comes out every Sunday afternoon as well. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at Hasting Kevin. And of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to once again thank our guest Lee Keller for joining us. Follow him at Regicidal on both Twitter and Twitch, and everywhere else that he is out there in the social media landscape. I am Adam Howe, and on behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening. And with that, we bid you goodbye.
TaxAct can think of a million things more fun than filing taxes. TaxAct is going to name some now. Sitting in traffic. Folding a fitted bedsheet. Listening to your coworker talk about his fantasy team. Digging a hole. Digging an even larger hole next to that original hole. Unfortunately, TaxAct's filing software can't make taxes fun. But TaxAct can help you get them done. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The reviews are in for McDonald's hotter, juicier burgers. Let's hear what Hamburglar has to say.
Robble, robble.
What our old friend Hamburglar said is, the patties are juicier. The bun is a thing of beauty. The cheese perfectly melted.
Robble.
My burger dreams have come true. You heard him, folks. These are McDonald's best burgers ever. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Robble. Available at most restaurants in this area. Comparison of McDonald's classic burgers to prior burgers.
Hey parents, Greenlight is here to take one big thing off your to-do list, teaching your kids about money. With a Greenlight debit card and money app of their own, kids and teens learn to earn, save, and invest. You can send money instantly, set flexible controls, and get real-time notifications of your kids' money activity. Set up chores and put allowance on autopilot to reward them for their hard work. Then learn about the world of money together. Get 1 month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/podcast.